My name is Margaret Fields. I am 63 years old. I live in a small village in the north of England. I have lived here all my life. My house is small, just enough for one person. My husband died 11 years ago. Since then, I have been alone. I do not have pets. I do not have many friends. My 2 sons live in other cities with their own families. They have busy lives. They call me sometimes, but the calls are short. I understand. Everyone moves on. That is life. I run a small bookshop from my home. I sell old books, most of them collected over the years. People do not come often, but I keep the shop open. It gives me something to do. I dust the shelves. I sit by the window with a cup of tea. I read. I wait. Some days are very quiet. No one visits. I do not mind. I have learned to live in silence. I wake up, make tea, open the shop, eat lunch, clean, and then go to bed. It is not an exciting life, but it is simple. Still, sometimes I feel something is missing. I do not talk about it. I do not even say it to myself. But in my heart, I know I want something more. I want to feel seen again. I want to feel alive, even just for a moment. I do not need anything big. Just a little warmth would be enough. One Tuesday morning, I went to the bakery. I bought bread and some tea. On the way home, I stopped by the market to buy apples. I was waiting in line when I saw a young man helping an elderly man pick up coins that had dropped on the ground. He bent down slowly, picked up each coin, and handed them back. He smiled kindly and said, "Take your time." He did not rush or look away. His kindness was quiet and natural. I watched him for a moment, and something about him stayed in my mind. Later that week I saw him again. This time, he was standing outside the pharmacy. He was talking to the shop owner and laughing. When he saw me, he gave a small nod and smiled. I smiled back. I did not know his name. I did not know anything about him, but his smile made me feel something I had not felt in a long time. I felt noticed. The next day he walked past my shop. He glanced inside, then stopped. He opened the door and looked around. "Is this a bookshop?" he asked. I said yes. He stepped inside and looked at the shelves. "Do you have any books about gardening?" I showed him a few. He picked one and smiled. "I like these old ones," he said. His voice was calm and soft. He paid with coins and said, "Thank you." Then he left. I stood there for a moment, holding the small coins in my hand, feeling strangely happy. His name was Daniel. I learned this a few days later when he came back. He said, "I liked the gardening book. Do you have any books on tools or repairs?" I found one for him. As he looked through it, we started talking. He told me he worked at the repair shop near the bakery. He fixed bicycles and other things. He had no family nearby. His parents had died when he was young. He had grown up with his grandfather, but he had passed away last year. Now Daniel lived alone in a small flat above the shop. He came to the shop more often. Sometimes he bought a book. Sometimes he just looked around. Other times he stayed for a cup of tea. We spoke about small things, the weather, work, books. I looked forward to his visits. I told myself it was nothing, just a kind young man who liked books. But in truth, his visits became the best part of my day. One afternoon, I was trying to move a heavy box in the shop. Daniel walked in and said, "Let me help you." He lifted the box easily and put it down near the back room. "You should not move heavy things alone," he said. I laughed and said, "I do it all the time." He smiled and replied, "That does not mean you should." That moment stayed in my heart. It was not just about the box. It was about being cared for. Another time, he brought me a small bag of biscuits. "They gave me extras at the bakery," he said. "Thought you might like some." I made tea and we sat together. We talked for almost an hour. I told him about my sons, about my husband, about the early days of the bookshop. He listened quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not try to give advice. He just listened. It had been years since someone gave me that kind of attention. Over the next few weeks, his visits became more regular. Sometimes he brought stories from his day. Sometimes he came in silence and just read a book for a while. I started baking again. I made scones and pies. I said they were for the shop, but really, I made them for him. I also began to dress a little nicer. I wore my good cardigan. I brushed my hair more carefully. I wore a little perfume. I told myself it was just to feel better, but I knew the truth. One morning, I found a small note under a teacup in the shop. It was a piece of torn paper with only one line written in pen. "This place feels like home." There was no name, but I knew who had left it. I read it again and again. My hands were shaking. I sat down and looked out the window. My heart was beating fast. I had not felt this way in many years. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "I do not know what this is. I do not know what it means, but it feels kind. It feels safe. I am not afraid of being alone, but I think I am more afraid of never feeling something again. Maybe I am too old. Maybe it is too late. But maybe, just maybe, it is not." Daniel came the next day. He acted like nothing had changed. He smiled and helped me dust the top shelves. I said nothing about the note. Neither did he. But something had changed. I could feel it. We sat and drank tea as the sky grew dark. We did not talk much that day. We did not need to. The silence was full. That night I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I looked at my face, at the lines and the gray hair. But for the first time in years, I saw something new. I saw a woman who still had a heart that could feel. A woman who still wanted to be seen, to be known. I smiled at myself and said quietly, "You are still here." And in that quiet moment, I knew something was beginning. Not loud, not rushed, just real. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. After that day with the note in the flower pot, my heart felt warmer after that. I looked at the little paper again and again. It said only one thing: "You are the only peaceful part of my day." The words were simple, but they touched my heart. I had not received such words in many years. They didn't feel like poetry. They felt like truth. I didn't tell Aaron I found the note, and he didn't ask if I saw it. He continued to visit me, like always. Some days we just said hello and goodbye. Other days, we talked about small things, how the weather had changed, what we were cooking, what books we liked. The words didn't matter much. It was the feeling between us that started to grow. Soon, I started to look forward to the sound of his steps near my house. I would check the window, pretending to move the curtain. I knew it was silly. I was old enough to stop hoping for these things. But my heart didn't care about my age. My heart only cared that it was finally beating again. One afternoon, Aaron brought fresh bread from the bakery. "They had extra," he said. "Thought you might like it." I smiled and invited him to sit for tea. We sat in the small room with 2 old chairs and a low table. The bread was still warm. I made tea, and we talked. "I never liked this town when I was younger," he said. "But now I feel more at home." "Why?" I asked. He looked at me with quiet eyes. "Because I found someone who listens." He didn't need to say more. I knew what he meant, and I felt the same. That evening, I didn't feel like a widow. I didn't feel like a woman left behind by time. I felt like a person, someone who was still seen, still heard, still alive. As days passed, our small talks became longer. One day, he asked about my life before. I told him about my candle shop, about how I started it after my husband passed. I told him it was the only thing that helped me feel useful. He listened carefully. He didn't try to give advice. He didn't say, "That's nice." He said, "That's brave." No one had called me brave in a long time. That night, I opened an old box filled with photos. My husband's picture was there. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel confused. I just felt like I was starting a new chapter, not closing the old one. A few days later, something new happened. I told Aaron about the day my husband died. I told him how I stood in the hospital room, holding his hand, trying to be strong for my sons. I told him how I stayed quiet for weeks after, not because I didn't want to cry, but because I didn't want others to see me weak. As I spoke, my voice broke. My hands shook a little. I stopped, afraid I had said too much. But Aaron didn't move away. He didn't change the subject. He said softly, "You don't have to be strong all the time. You can just be." His words gave me space to breathe. He shared his story too. His parents had died when he was 16. Since then, he had been on his own. He worked jobs, stayed in small apartments, and learned to fix things. He said he always kept his feelings inside because no one was there to hear them. "But now I want to share them," he said. "With you." That moment was quiet, but powerful. We didn't hug. We didn't hold hands. We just sat together, two people who had carried pain in silence for years, now finding someone to carry it with. After that, I started to change. I wore a little lipstick one day just to see how it felt. I changed the flowers on my table. I even bought a new teacup. I told myself it was for guests, but I knew it was for him. One evening he asked, "Do you ever think about seeing other places?" I laughed. "At my age?" He smiled. "Why not?" I thought for a moment. When I was young, I wanted to see the ocean. But I got married, had children, and life went in a different direction. He said, "It's never too late." Those words stayed with me for days. It was not a plan. It was just a thought. But it felt exciting to even have that thought again. Around this time, I began to feel nervous too. I started to wonder why Aaron spent time with me. I was much older. I didn't wear modern clothes. I didn't know the music or movies people his age liked. I had gray hair and lines on my face. One night, after he left, I sat in the dark and asked myself, what does he want from me? Does he just feel sorry for me? The next morning, I found another note. It was inside my mailbox. It said, "You are not a question to answer. You are a feeling to keep." I didn't know how he always understood me without asking. But even with these warm moments, fear started to grow. I worried about the neighbors. I worried about my sons. I worried that people would not understand. I had lived a quiet, simple life for many years. Was I ready to live a life that others might not accept? One Sunday, Aaron came over with 2 cups of coffee. He had a soft smile, but I saw something behind it. He said, "I think people are starting to talk." I nodded. "Yes, I've heard the whispers too." He looked at me seriously. "I just want to know if you're okay." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be okay. but I was not sure. "I don't want to lose what we have," I said. "You won't," he replied, "unless you decide to let it go." That night, I didn't sleep much. I thought about my children. What would they say? What would they think of me if they knew I had feelings for a man their age? Would they be angry? Would they feel embarrassed? I picked up a notebook and began to write. Not a letter, just thoughts. I wrote, "I don't know what this is, but it feels real. It feels kind. I don't want to hide from something that makes me feel whole." As I closed the notebook, I felt stronger. Maybe I could live without everyone's approval, but I didn't want to live without peace. And Aaron gave me peace. That week, we met again at my house. I made apple pie. It was something I hadn't done in years. My husband used to love it. Aaron took one bite and smiled. "This is the best thing I've eaten all year." I laughed. "You're just being polite." He looked at me and said, "No, I'm being honest." His voice was always calm, never too loud, never fake. That made every word feel real. After he left that evening, I stood at the door for a long time. The stars were out. The air was cool. I felt something strong in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, but something new. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something special. Not loud or dramatic, but honest and soft. The kind of love that grows quietly and stays. And for the first time in many years, I let myself believe that it was okay to feel this way. Even if the world didn't understand. Even if no one else said it was right. I knew how I felt, and I couldn't lie to my own heart. The next few days were calm on the outside, but my thoughts were not. I kept thinking about Aaron's words. He said we would not lose what we had unless I chose to let it go. I didn't want to let it go, but I was still afraid. I had spent so many years living a quiet life. I had kept my heart safe by not opening it. Now that it was open, I didn't know how to protect it. One afternoon, I went to the corner shop to buy some sugar. As I walked past two women near the post box, they stopped talking for a second. I heard my name. Then I heard Aaron's. I didn't hear the full sentence, but one word was clear. Shame. I kept walking. I didn't look back, but the words stayed with me. That evening, I didn't speak much. I made dinner and sat alone. The food had no taste. The house felt colder. I thought about all the people who had smiled at me before. Now they looked at me like I had done something wrong. I thought about my sons. They hadn't called in weeks. The next day, I went to the library to return a book. The woman behind the desk smiled, but it felt different. It was the kind of smile that hides judgment. I gave the book back, said thank you, and walked home quickly. When Aaron came that evening, he noticed my mood right away. He sat down, took his tea, and asked, "What happened?" I waited a moment, then I told him about the whispering. I told him what I heard, what I saw, and what I feared. I didn't cry. I just spoke slowly, each word heavy with the truth. Aaron was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I know this isn't easy for you. I wish I could take the looks and the words and throw them away. But I can't. I can only promise you that I will never leave you alone with them." His words made my eyes fill with tears. I didn't cry loudly, just quiet tears that dropped into my tea. I wiped them with my sleeve. I didn't want to look weak, but I knew I was safe with him. That weekend, my younger son called. I was surprised to see his name on the phone. My hand shook a little when I picked it up. "Hello?" I said. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "I need to ask you something. Is it true? Are you seeing that young man?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. His name is Aaron. He's a good man." "A good man?" he repeated. "Mom, he's 30. What are you thinking? People are laughing. They think you've lost your mind." I wanted to explain, but he didn't let me. He kept speaking. "You're ruining everything. Our family name. Our respect. What are you doing?" I said. "I'm just trying to be happy." He didn't reply. The line went silent for a moment. Then he said, "I can't believe this," and ended the call. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. My chest felt heavy. I didn't cry right away. I just sat still. Later that night, I cried quietly into my pillow. I wasn't crying because he was angry. I was crying because he didn't even try to understand. When Aaron came the next day, I told him everything. He listened like he always did. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just let me speak. When I finished, he said, "Your son is afraid, but I'm not. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." That was the first time I realized how strong his love was. It was not loud. It didn't try to prove itself. It just stayed. After that, we kept seeing each other like before. We didn't talk about the whispers or the phone call. We talked about normal things. But in every word, there was care. Every look was full of respect. One evening, Aaron brought flowers. Not roses, but wildflowers. The kind that grow by the river. I placed them in a jar and smiled. He said, "You make this house feel like home." Later that week, he came over looking nervous. He didn't sit down like usual. He stood in front of me, holding something in his hand. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "and I want to ask you something. I know this may sound strange, but will you marry me?" My heart stopped. I looked at him, speechless. I don't care what people say, he continued. I don't care about age or stories. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel calm. I feel right. I want to build a life with you. I didn't answer right away. I asked him to sit down. We had tea, and I looked at him carefully. He meant every word. I could see it in his eyes. That night, I didn't sleep much. I walked around the house, looking at old photos. I looked at my husband's chair, at the table where my sons once did their homework. I thought about all the years I gave to others. Now, someone wanted to give something to me. Not money, not gifts, just love. The next morning, I said yes. We didn't have a big wedding, no music, no party, just a quiet moment at the town office. We signed the papers and looked at each other. That was enough. We didn't tell many people, but someone saw us. And soon, the news spread. The gossip started again, worse than before. Some people said Aaron wanted my money. Others said he had mental problems. They didn't know I had no money. They didn't know his mind was the clearest I had ever seen. One neighbor stopped talking to me. Another made a joke at the market. But we kept walking, hand in hand. My sons didn't call, not even to ask if it was true. Their silence was louder than any words. But Aaron stayed close. Every day he asked, "How is your heart today?" Not just, "How are you?" but "How is your heart?" I always gave an honest answer. Sometimes I said quiet, sometimes strong, sometimes tired, but never empty again. Over time, some neighbors changed. A few smiled again. One older woman said, "If he makes you happy, that's all that matters." That made me smile for hours. Weeks turned into months. We lived simply. We worked in the garden. We shared meals. We laughed. We rested. One Sunday, the doorbell rang. It was my older son. Behind him stood his wife and their children. My heart jumped. I invited them in. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just looked around the house, then at me. "Mom," he said, "I was wrong." I waited quietly. He continued, "I thought you were confused, but I've seen the photos. I've heard how people talk about you. And you don't look weak. You look happy." I nodded slowly. He looked at Aaron, then back at me. "I may not understand it, but I see that he respects you. And maybe that's enough." I felt my eyes fill with tears, not because of pain, but because of healing. That night, I sat in the garden with Aaron. The sky was pink. The air was cool. I took his hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up." He smiled. "No one gives up on something real They just wait for others to understand. And now they had.